It's time to break down the biggest stories of the day. This is the top 3 stories of the day on KSLSports.com. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Ben, we are very excited. Coming up tomorrow, of course, draft day. From where the station's going to be there from 3 to 10. It's our NBA draft roundtable at The Cage. Book your batting cage time now. Click on the draft roundtable link at KSLSports.com and score 10% off with promo code THEZONE. So here's the deal. It's a great place to watch the draft. You come out, take a few cuts at a great price, 10% off, promo code THEZONE. And then you hang out with us for draft night, which is super fun.
Talk to you about what's going on with the draft, what's going on behind the scenes, what we've heard. Come hang out, though.
Not
everything makes it on the radio.
You know, watch the show. Come meet Coach Cleve, who is awesome. But basically our whole staff is going to be there at various times. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So join us at The Cage coming up tomorrow. And again, the station is going to be there from 3 to 10. And Ben, I like the draft show. It's a fun show to do. Draft night is usually a pretty fun night. Some better than others. But this one has the potential to be really good.
Jazz have 2 picks. I mean, they're going to be active. When they have a top 5 pick, it's a big deal.
Time for the top 3 stories of the day. KSLSports.com, brought to you by J. Brooks Jewelers. Cherish your love with J. Brooks Jewelers. Explore their expertly crafted engagement rings made of the finest materials. J. Brooks Jewelers. All right, Christian, what is number 1?
Number 1, there's a saying I like to repeat often. Once a trailblazer, always a trailblazer.
Jrue Holiday traded back to the Portland Trailblazers after a weird 2-year rental by the Boston Celtics from a team that never actually saw him suit up. If you remember, Jrue Holiday was acquired by the Trailblazers in the Damian Lillard trade. Where this ties into the Jazz is the Jazz thought they had a trade worked out to acquire Jrue Holiday, but he insisted he would rather go play in Boston for a contender and have a chance to win a title, where he did, and then sign an extension. But after the Jason Tatum Achilles injury, they are shedding money and contracts in Boston, and the Trailblazers decided to go back and get him in exchange for Anthony Simons.
Man, it's just a reminder how bad that Milwaukee trade for Dame really was.
Very
just tough. The worst. And they had to know that Portland was going to flip Jrue.
Was going to reroute him.
They had to know where at least a likely destination was going to be.
You would think so, but I do think that's some of the difference of like, what's a good general manager? What's a good front office? What do those guys actually do? And I think sometimes it is thinking 2 and 3 steps ahead and not just, what's the best offer right away, 1 for 1, without recognizing like what's the residual ripple effect that's going to happen after. And it, as much as Milwaukee might have been happy with the bet they got in Damian Lillard, and clearly it hasn't worked out, they undid their any chance of winning a title by sending Jrue Holiday to Boston, even if it was a secondary trade.
Because Milwaukee has had at the time, no idea what leverage was and who had the leverage and whatever. I mean, how could Portland even pry Jrue Holiday out of there to begin with? Yeah. They could have found another way to make the salaries work, likely. I don't know for sure, I suppose. But no, Portland was like, yeah, throw in Jrue Holiday, man.
Whatever.
We're giving you Dame. Even though what Portland wasn't telling you was, God, we got to get off this contract. We got to get off it now. This was a huge mistake.
I do.
And to trade for him back again is hilarious to me.
Anthony Simons, who's going from Portland to Boston, is a bit of an interesting case. There's a lot of Keontae George there. In fact, you look at their first 2 years in the NBA, not their points per game, Keontae's got him there, but their shooting percentages are very similar. And then Anthony Simons' 3rd year, he kind of broke out and established himself as like a legit NBA scoring guard. And I'll be curious if Keontae George is still on the roster for the Jazz next season, if he can make a similar leap. But all the flaws. Bad defensively, kind of some weird, like just lack of attention to detail in a lot of important parts of the game, which made him a guy that Portland kind of always had on the trade block. Anthony Simons has always been available.
Yeah.
I was surprised this was the move because we were talking yesterday about how Portland kind of bucked a trend of midway through the season when they had one of the worst records. They said, let's flip the switch and try and win, even though there was kind of no pathway to catch up and make the play-in. They did put on the engines for a little bit there and got within 5 or 6 games at one point and then still ended up in the lottery. But this is like a win-now move for a team that I'm not sure is ready to win now.
Well, here's what makes it interesting to me, Ben. is that this is the type of project actually that Boston has been successful with.
Yeah, they have.
Remind us all, which team Simons has been playing for?
Portland.
Ever since the old man died, and apparently the cough syrup generation of the Allen family has taken over. The purple drink generation. They've been one of the worst run franchises in the NBA. It is really crazy.
Yeah.
And they've had kind of a bad culture. I mean, it would not be beyond reasoning to me that the Portland Trailblazers did not get the most out of Anthony Simons. And in that environment, he did not get the most out of himself. Now, you change locale, and all of a sudden he's on a team where he has to fall in line, and the bar is higher, and it's more well-run. Well, maybe he makes it, maybe he doesn't. But this is exactly what Kristaps Porzingis was, for example.
Yes.
Because Simons doesn't have zero value, neither did Porzingis. This is not signing Chris Dunn off the couch.
Right.
This is an NBA guy, but somebody that the Ben Andersons of the world, and not just Ben, but the basketball people are kind of saying, they've been trying to trade him forever, and he's not really that great. Well, Boston maybe sees something and can plug him in. The funny thing about, let's get him under our umbrella is that not umbrellas are all that great, but everybody says that.
Yeah. Let's see if there's something there that they didn't see. Or we see something they didn't. Truthfully, I trust most teams to recognize what they have and don't have. But Kristaps is a great example. He went to Washington. He was in Dallas, even though Rick Carlisle is clearly an offensive genius. Didn't really know how to best utilize him. And he buys in finally, and maybe he just had to make X amount of stops in his career before he fully realized, hey, I'm not a number one player, but I can be a really good number three and actually win a title. And that's what Kristaps did with the Celtics. Anthony Simons, best case scenario, he kind of clicks in. His focus is a little bit higher. I actually like him quite a bit. He's a really talented player. And the scoring is still there, and the efficiency climbs just a little bit. It doesn't need to skyrocket. But he fits really well next to, Derek White, if Derek White's still there, and Jaylen Brown, if Jaylen Brown's still there. And then when Jason Tatum comes back, you kind of have this guy who can be your third or fourth guy who can really shoot and really score. I think there is value there. So I like the bet. And then if it doesn't work out, he's an expiring contract and he's off your books after this year.
Not to mention they got off Holiday's contract as well.
He had 3 years and $100 million left.
I also think your point about Porzingis is a good one, but in a different way, because I don't necessarily come along with your analysis that he figured something out. I don't think he did.
Okay.
I think he was who he was in New York. He got traded. Remember, his value when he got traded to Dallas was high.
Yeah.
That was the only good thing Phil Jackson ever did as a GM of the Knicks, and now they're moving off him. It was very controversial because people thought that Kristaps was pretty good, and maybe thought he was better than he was. But I always thought he did not have the correct role in New York, and then he gets traded to Dallas, where he never had the opportunity to have a role. And so all of a sudden his value, much like Chris Bosh playing with LeBron, his value goes through the floor because they don't use him. Rick Carlisle or not, the job was to stand there and watch Luka dribble.
Yeah.
And then he gets traded when his value is low to Washington, which is the desert.
Yeah.
The desert. Nobody's going to notice you. Nobody's going to care if it's the desert. So Boston brings Kristaps out of the desert, finds a better role for him, to your point, of he's not your one, he's probably your three. You find a better role for the guy, and then all of a sudden, wow, he's really good. Well, he didn't forget how to play basketball and then remember how to play basketball. He went to a bozo team, and then he got traded to another bozo team, and then a smart team pulled him out of the desert and found a role for him. So I disagree with the characterization a little bit, although I think we land in the same spot where they found a good role for him and he has thrived. Simons, what's his role in Portland? Well, you go look out for you on a bad team, and if you really don't try, it doesn't matter because they're not really trying to win. Your name's not Scoot. Your name's not Scoot, so nobody cares about you. You're not a beloved player like Dame.
Right.
You're just kind of here, go exist and do your thing. Well, that's not his role. What's his role? Well, Boston's probably got something in mind, and if he falls in line and does it, I bet you we're having a different conversation about Anthony Simons 2 years from now.
I agree. I like this trade a lot. I like this trade more for Boston than I do for Portland. What is interesting is two of the names that we're talking about, the Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, are the two names that did end up in Boston, but were pretty heavily rumored to be targets of the Jazz. The Jazz really tried to trade for Kristaps Porzingis the same year, if not before, he landed in Boston, and tried to trade for Jrue Holiday the same summer he ended up in Boston, which, again, the Angels are going to think alike and value the same things and have probably talked about those guys at previous, when they were working together, when they were previous stops. So it's not surprising.
Oh, the Jrue Holiday Jazz rumors go back to when he was in New Orleans or got moved from Philly to New Orleans. I mean, he's a good player.
Yeah, he's a good player.
Nobody should be shocked about that. And Kristaps was a buy low kind of guy in the desert. Again, a sharp GM should be looking for that type of thing. But Jrue is 1,000 years old now, so
and has a lot of money left.
There's not somebody that the Jazz, I think, would be interested in.
I agree.
Neither probably Kristaps either. All right, what's next?
Number 2, Tyrese Haliburton put out a social media post confirming the torn Achilles. And in that post, he said he would do it all again, torn Achilles and all. He doesn't have any regrets.
That's fine. But I was thinking how shocking it is to be Sunday morning, you're preparing for Game 7, the biggest game of your life, and Monday morning you're waking up, you've lost the championship, you have a torn Achilles, and you're out for the next year. That's a pretty steep drop-off. And he's only 25 years old, but that's going to be a difficult challenge to overcome and come back from, and I hope he has the ability to do it. But like we said yesterday, I think this is going to be a different-looking Pacers team.
I believe him when he says that he would do it again. I don't believe him that he says he has no regrets. How could you not?
Well, and again, this is a two-person story, right? Or a two-side story, which is Haliburton and also the Pacers. The Pacers are going to regret this for a long time.
This is why, a lot of people listen to their doctor or try to listen to their doctor or have to discipline themselves to listen to their doctor, because oftentimes when you make decisions like this, you can't make the best one in your own self-interest. Or at least not 100%.
Yeah.
And the danger in sports is when the franchise is also disregarding your health. And I guess I shouldn't I'm not accusing Indiana of anything. No. I don't know this circumstance, but we see it all the time. It's so much that it's like a trope in movies, right? Where the crooked doctor of the NFL team has been prescribing drugs and not looking out for the best interest of, but it's all about the winning,
Right.
Like it happens but somebody should be looking out for the best interest of the people involved. And I get it that he would make the same decision. But knowing the outcome, I wouldn't wish a torn Achilles on anybody.
No, of course not.
And it does totally alter his career. And it does totally alter the franchise.
Yeah, alters the Pacers' future probably even more so than it does Haliburton.
And it's the reason that you don't represent yourself in a trial. You don't always, you're too close to it. You don't always know your best interest. But you got to figure out who does know your best interest. And if nobody is looking out for your best interest, that's tough. And that happens to a lot of athletes, and that's a bad situation.
Yeah.
And I hope that wasn't here in Indiana, but imagine you're concerned. I'm really worried this is going to be a bigger thing. And he comes to you and says, God, what should I do? And I'm saying, give it a go.
Yeah.
Gross. Anyway, I hope speedy recovery for that guy.
Agreed. I'll be curious what the pivot the Pacers make is. Because they could try and stay afloat. They're not going to be as good without Tyrese Haliburton, but they were pretty good when he wasn't on the floor and T.J. McConnell was out there, and they may try and replace him and see if they can find a cheap backfill for the time being.
Well, that they won't go for losing because Indiana doesn't do that.
Yep. But, and I tweeted this out yesterday, how astute of them to remember they made a weird trade after Game 5. They traded this year's first-round pick to New Orleans. It was the 23rd pick to get their own pick back next year. Teams in the finals rarely make trades. Denver, ironically, did do it when they made their finals run, but they just acquired 3 second-round picks. If I remember correctly, it was something kind of goofy. But you can only trade picks. You can't trade players. But they acquired their own pick next year, and now they have a chance to, if it all falls apart, it'd be nice to have your lottery pick.
Yeah.
But that was really astute. That ended up being really a smart trade.
What's next?
Number 3, more on BYU football, landing Ryder Lyons, one of their highest-rated recruits ever.
This is a huge story, Ben. However, not huge enough to get a full segment on Armpit's show.
Sure.
About a 90-second cut. Make the announcement. That's a nice-looking bedroom you got there. Have a nice day. Although you did point out that we all should have known it was coming based on the BYU posters in the background.
Yeah, and I guess he did have some Oregon back there behind his head, too. You could kind of see the green and the yellow. But Ryder Lyons' brothers, Walker Lyons, also played or plays, was a 4-star recruit, and played at USC. So comes from a football family, certainly, but his story is BYU offered him when he was in the 8th grade and has believed in him since the very beginning, and so he's going to stick with that.
Absolutely. And that, you know what, this is BYU playing a different advantage. We talk about the NIL advantage a lot. This is a different one.
Yeah.
It's you have a connection to this university, and BYU has always recruited younger players, as weird as that sounds. But it doesn't surprise me that they knew about him in the 8th grade, and it doesn't surprise me that he's going to BYU. And it's what they have to do. It's their advantage. And it's going to be their advantage in the transfer world, too. Because if they have a prayer of keeping Lyons, it's going to be because of that connection. Wait, hold on real quick here. Here's the armpit segment. I'm going to see how long it was.
It was at least 150
I think it was
seconds.
like 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was at least 150 seconds. 2:30.
No longer than 5.
No, of course not.
Got Aaron Rodgers coming up.
Meanwhile, Aaron Rodgers is still
Which,
up.
to be fair, again, you're talking about a quarterback who's not going to be on the football field for 2 more years in a relatively niche situation. A.J. DeBonsa is way more pressing than Ryder Lyons is.
All Ryder had to do is say, I'm taking it over to Screamin' A. And I'll tell you what, he would have gotten a segment.
What's interesting about this, if you wanted to have a big conversation, is what's more valuable for BYU? Is it to get the top basketball recruit who's going to be there for 6 months, or a top football recruit who might be your quarterback for multiple years?
BYU is and still is a football school.
It is. I get it. But you know what? There's a lot of quick payoff with A.J. DeBonsa because he comes in, he's really visible, he's going to be good right away, and then he's going to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft or number 2 overall pick in the draft.
Fair enough.
There is like a lot of instant return there. But you're right. BYU, and look at where the money goes. Where's the NIL money going to go? Where's the house settlement money going to go? Most of it's to football. And why? Because the return on investment's awesome.
BYU is a football school.
Yeah.
But basketball is easier to do it. So not a surprise they're making a splash in basketball because that's an easier sport to change more dramatically right away.
And the visibility is extraordinarily high.
Yeah. All right, stay tuned. More Jacob Ben coming up next, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present...
This is JJ and Alex.
Watching an unlikely champion like the Florida Panthers, they sucked forever. One of the most irrelevant pro sports franchises of the last 2 decades until 2022. They're the 8th seed and they end up making a run to the Stanley Cup final. And ever since then, they've dominated this league. It takes time. The Panthers had to be patient. They got the right guy to lead it. It all came together for them. So now we're dreaming of a Stanley Cup here because we have an NHL team. You watch the Florida Panthers do it. The Stanley Cup going places that no one ever thought it would be. Why not here? Why not in Utah? You're thinking about, okay, what could the Utah Mammoth do to make this happen? And now it's a reality. Like, this is something the Mammoth can go do. And I think that Ryan Smith is going to be highly motivated to provide the resources to do it. And I think you got a general manager who could build a Stanley Cup championship team. The parts are in place here to be able to do something like this.
Catch JJ and Alex afternoons from 3 to 6. Presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.